Hello, class 8 students. How are you all? So I hope all my students are absolutely fine. Now, in today's class, we are going to understand, we're going to read chapter number 15. In the previous class, when we started chapter number 14, we talked about the three organs of the government. And I told you that this concept of three organs of the government, of the separation of powers between the three organs of the government was something which was basically a concept given by one of the French philosophers, Montesquieu, right? So I told you that in all modern democracies, you will find this system of separation of powers between the three organs of the government. What are these? Legislature, executive, and judiciary. So when we talked about the first organ of government, that is legislature, we talked about that who all come under this legislature. So like in India, it's the parliament, which is a part of legislature, wherein we discussed about the two houses of the parliament, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. We discussed what are the powers that these houses enjoy and what are their functions, what are their exclusive powers and all their functions. And we also discussed as to who all can be a member of either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, and other details like what is their duration and who is the presiding officer. So we talked about the first organ of the government, that is the legislature, and in India it's the parliament. Now in today's class, when we study chapter number 15, we are going to be talking about the second organ of the government, which is the legislature, which is the executive. So who exactly forms the executive part of the government? We're going to find that out. So quickly open your books to chapter number 15. So as all of you can see, chapter number 15, the name is executive, and this chapter, it is on page number 139. Now, when we talk about executive, so in this particular chapter, we're going to talk about the president, what are his powers and functions. So we're going to talk about this in the Indian context, because obviously in each country, the president has different set of powers and functions. So whatever we're going to study about the three organs of the government, we are going to study in the Indian context. So for legislature, we talked about the Indian parliament. What is the composition like? What is the structure like? Executive, again, talking about the Indian context. So we'll talk about what are the powers and functions of the Indian president, what are the powers of the Indian vice president, what are the powers and functions of the Indian prime minister, and we are also going to talk about the council of ministers that exists in the Indian parliament. All right, so let us start reading about the second organ of the government, that is the executive. So the president, vice president, and the prime minister and the council of ministers, these all people, they are the members of the union executive. Who are these? President, vice president, prime minister, and the council of ministers. These together make the executive or the union executive. What is the main function of this union executive? It enforces or implements the laws made by the union parliament. So whatever laws are made by the parliament, the execution, basically the implementation of these laws is done by the executive organ of the government. Executive comes from the word execute. So to carry out something. So it's the executive which is responsible for implementing or carrying out these laws. The president is the executive head of the Indian Republic. All the executive powers are vested in him. So in India, who is the executive head? President. And why is India called a republic? Do you know when is a nation called a republic? I think we've discussed this before also, but just a quick recap. A country where the head of the state is elected, that country is called as a republic. So in India, we elect the head of the state, and that's why India is called a republic. The president of India is the head of the state, and he or she is usually referred to as the first citizen of the country. Previous class, we studied how the president is elected. And all the executive powers I told you are vested with him and are exercised with the advice of the prime minister and the council of ministers. So whenever a law has to be passed, so let's say both the houses approve of the a particular law. Now it's the time to execute this law, to implement it, how it is to be implemented, or is there some more scrutiny required regarding the law, and all concerns related to that particular law. So it's the president who discusses this with the prime minister and the council of ministers. All right. Now we talk about who can be the president of India. First, of course, the person has to be an Indian citizen. He or she should have completed 35 years of age, should be qualified for the election as a member of Lok Sabha, not hold any office of profit under the government of India, state government or local authority, and he shall not be a member of either House of People or House of Legislature of any state. All right. Now, what are the terms of office? So he is elected for a term of 5 years and he may be re-elected. He can be removed from his office if he or she violates the Constitution of India. So if the president does something which is unconstitutional, which the Constitution of India does not allow, he or she can be removed. Now, how is he elected? He is indirectly elected by a special body known as Electoral College. The Electoral College consists of the elected members of the House of the Parliament, that is from the Lok Sabha, and the elected members of Legislative Assembly of the states and union territories. So these group of people are the one who elect the president of India. So who are this group? Of course, the elected members of the Legislative Assembly, or first the elected members of the House of the Parliament, that is Lok Sabha. Then elected members of the Legislative Assembly, that is MLAs we are talking about. Members of the Legislative Assembly. MLA, the full form is Member of Legislative Assembly. And of course, MLA of the state and the union territories. Now, impeachment, talking about the removal of the president. So first, one of the conditions we read that if he or she does something which is against the Constitution. The resolution to impeach the president must be approved by 2/3 members of both the houses of the Parliament. Only then the president can be removed. Now, the president has certain set of powers which we have divided into different categories. You remember in the previous class, we studied the different categories of powers that the legislature has. So we talked about legislative powers, financial powers, the executive powers, the judicial powers. Same is the case of with the president as well. So first is he or she appoints the prime minister. With the advice of the prime minister, he makes other important other appointments like attorney general, chief justice of Supreme Court, and those of High Court in the judges basically. Then members of UPSC, election commissioner, governor of state, chief commissioner of union territories, these all are appointed by the president, and every appointment in central government is in the name of president or under his authority. These are his executive powers. Now, what are his legislative powers? He can summon or end a session of the parliament and dissolve the Lok Sabha if the need arises. He can address the parliament at the commencement, that is the starting of the first session after the general election and the first session of each year. Then he can also summon a joint sitting of both the houses of the parliament, which is presided by the speaker of the Lok Sabha. And he can also appoint a member of the Lok Sabha to preside over its proceedings, the positions of speaker as well as deputy speaker, if these two positions are vacant. If there is no speaker or deputy speaker, then the president can ask any of the members of Lok Sabha to preside over the meetings of the Lok Sabha. Now, what are the financial powers? So a money bill can be introduced in the parliament only when with the president's recommendation. And who introduces the money bill? Remember in the last class we studied Lok Sabha. The other house. So the president lays the annual financial statement, that is the union budget, before the parliament. So again, this is an important financial power. Right? So like I told you, so the money bill we know that can be introduced in Lok Sabha, right? And the president is someone who can make certain recommendations. All right. Moving on, he can make advances out of the contingency fund of India to meet unforeseen expenses. He continues a finance commission after every 5 years to recommend the distribution of taxes between the center and the state. Now, what are the judicial powers of the president? He can grant pardon or reduce the punishment given to a convict. So if there is someone who is, convicted for a crime, he or she can approach the president. Of course, there's a proper hierarchy, and it's not like that anyone can just approach the president. It's just in very special cases that a convict is allowed to approach the president. So the president can either review, and say that this. So let's say someone is given a death sentence. So there is a possibility that if the president feels, of course, after proper scrutiny of the entire case, that this person should not be given death sentence, maybe life sentence, that power also the president has. And if the punishment needs to be reduced and the president sees that, this power also the president has. He is not answerable to any court for the exercise of his or her powers. No criminal cases can be lodged against the president in any court during his or her term of office. Understand this line. It says no criminal cases can be lodged against the president in any court during his term, his or her term of office. So it's not like that someone was the Prime Minister of India 10 years back and now he's done something which is a punishable offense and there can be no criminal case against that person. Of course there can be. But during that tenure, there cannot be any case against that. Okay. Moving on. Now we talk about the emergency powers of the president. So first, let us understand what exactly we mean by emergency. Now, you remember we started this chapter of American Civil War. So what was happening? There was so much of hue and cry in the entire country because two communities were fighting against each other. So there was a lot of problem in the country. Or, there are some countries which undergo economic depression. That is, we say, that the economy has come to a standstill. There is no progress which is happening. That is also a state of emergency. Just two examples I'm giving. There is a state of civil war, or there is a great economic depression within the country. So these are two examples of emergency situations. So in this kind of a situation, which is an emergency, as we call it, the president has certain set of powers. What is this? He may proclaim a state of emergency in the whole or part of India if he realizes or feels that a grave situation, that a serious situation has arisen in which the security of India or part of its territory might get threatened by war or external aggression or rebellion. That is also a part of the emergency power. So if the president feels that there's a need to announce an emergency, he or she can do that. But what are the situations? So there's a civil war, or there is an external attack, or let's say, there's some economic problem which is going on. So these are some situations when the president can announce the emergency. Now, what are the discretionary powers? So the president can exercise this power without consulting the Council of Ministers. He may put his or her assent to a non-money bill and send it back to the parliament for reconsideration. Understand this thing. So if it is a non-money bill, he can ask it to be reviewed again. Sorry. If no political party wins the majority in the general election, the president may choose any person as the Prime Minister of India. The person may or may not be a member of parliament. These are the discretionary powers. Now we talk about the vice president. So qualification, of course, he or she must be citizen of India, should not be less than 35 years of age. He must be qualified for election as member of Rajya Sabha, and he should not hold any office of profit under the union or state government. What is the term of the vice president? 5 years. He may resign by writing to the president. He may also be removed if a resolution of the Rajya Sabha, which should be supported by the Lok Sabha. And election, he is elected by the Electoral College, consisting of elected members of both the houses of the parliament, that is Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Now, what are the powers? So in the previous class, we studied that he is the presiding officer of Rajya Sabha, or the ex-official chairman of Rajya Sabha. And what are his main functions when he's presiding over the meetings of Rajya Sabha? He regulates the proceedings and debates of the house. Which house are we talking about? Rajya Sabha. He decides the order of the speech. He decides the admissibility of resolutions or questions, and he may adjourn or suspend the business of the house if he feels that there is a need to do that. And he gives direction to the chairman of various committees. Now we talk about the Prime Minister. All right. Okay, so talking about the Prime Minister. One second. So let us come to page number 141 of our text. So in a parliamentary form of government, Prime Minister occupies a very important position. He is the head of the government and also the chief advisor to the president. Now understand, the president is the head of the state, but the prime minister is the head of the government, and this we are talking about in the Indian context. So do not mix up these two positions. President, head of state; prime minister, head of the government. Now, how is the prime minister appointed? So we all know about this, but we'll just have a quick look at this. So after the general elections are over, the president normally appoints the leader of the political party winning maximum number of seats in the Lok Sabha as the Prime Minister of India. So whichever party wins the elections, the head of the party basically, or someone whom the party also feels, is elected as the Prime Minister of India, right? All right, so moving ahead. Now, if no political party wins an absolute majority in the general election, then the president appoints any person who may or may not be a member of either houses of the parliament as the Prime Minister of India. Now, what are the powers of the Prime Minister of India? He acts as a link between the president and the Council of Ministers and conveys all the decisions taken by the council to the president. On his advice, the president may summon, prorogue the sessions of the parliament and can dissolve the Lok Sabha. He acts as a pillar of the Council of Ministers, and if he resigns, then the entire ministry has, or the entire council has to resign. And on the advice of the Prime Minister, the ministers of the council are appointed by the president. The Prime Minister, he also distributes portfolios among the ministers. So what do you mean by portfolios in ministry? So you have a railway minister, you have a minister of the food industry, so you have, let's say, minister of the information and technology. So these all different portfolios, these different ministries that we talk about are called as portfolios. All right. And the Prime Minister rescues the ministers when they are harassed by the opposition. Very important role. He or she presides over the meeting of the cabinet and prepares agendas of the meetings. And he can ask a minister to resign or advise the president to dismiss any minister in case there is difference of opinion. And he's also the leader of the Lok Sabha. And of course, he coordinates in different government departments. He or she acts as a chairman of various standing and ad hoc committees. And ad hoc here meaning more or less temporary. Now we talk about Council of Ministers. So we've talked a lot about Council of Ministers when we were discussing about the powers of the Prime Minister. What exactly is this Council of Ministers? So these are some set of ministers who are basically appointed by the president with the advice of the Prime Minister that we have just read. Now there are three categories of ministers, namely cabinet ministers, ministers of state, and the deputy ministers. What is the function of Council of Ministers? They prepare the foreign and domestic policies of the government. They help the Prime Minister in the administration of the country. They prepare the President's address to the Parliament and advises the President to issue ordinances or declare emergency. And the Finance Minister prepares the annual budget. This we are aware of and introduce it in the Parliament. So this is all about the executive, the second organ of the government. Now, just a little small piece of advice I want to give you. So when students study this chapter, and when you will listen to this video, read it again, probably for some time you will remember whatever we have studied. But what happens that during the exam, students generally get confused and you end up giving the wrong answer. So you write the powers of Prime Minister as the power of President and vice versa. So how are we going to solve this problem? What I want all of you to do is on a piece on a sheet. What you can do is you can probably draw a table wherein you can make columns as President, Prime Minister, Council of Ministers. Okay. So Council of Ministers, of course, you can remember. So you can have two columns here, President and Prime Minister. So what you can basically do is, so the first column, eligibility. So you know what are the qualifications. Then what are the powers? So you have legislative, executive, financial, whatever powers. So you write those powers and just quick detail about those powers. Then impeachment. Then tenure. So you basically make 4 to 5 areas which are, probably basically the grounds on which you need to remember the points related to the president and the prime minister. So once you have that sheet prepared, and I don't want you to just copy it from your textbook like on a and put it on MS Word in your computer. No, I want you to write it in your, of course, own handwriting. Why? Because once you write it yourself, it is for sure that you will remember. And once you make this table, what are you supposed to do? Put that sheet on your study table. So every time you sit to study, you'll look at that, read it. So the more you read, the more you will be able to retain. Okay, so I hope all of you have understood this chapter. In the next class, we are going to talk about the third organ of the government, that is judiciary. Till then, bye-bye and take care.